Have you ever wondered how the United States became the world's sole superpower? We often hear about the special relationship between the US and the UK, a bond forged in war and shared values. But what if I told you this relationship has a hidden, darker side, a story of rivalry, economic warfare, and a quiet, decades-long struggle for global dominance? This isn't just history. It's the secret story of how one empire fell and another rose from its ashes. A tale of ambition that reshaped our modern world. Let's rewind to the end of World War II. The British Empire, though victorious, was exhausted and deeply in debt. It had once been the empire on which the sun never set, controlling a quarter of the world's land and people. Its currency, the pound sterling, was the bedrock of global trade. But the war changed everything. Britain had poured its wealth into fighting, and by 1945, it owed billions, much of it to the United States. Across the Atlantic, America was a different story. The war had supercharged its economy. Its factories were humming, its gold reserves were overflowing, and its military was unmatched. While Europe and Asia lay in ruins, America stood tall, ready to step onto the world stage. But it wasn't just about stepping up. It was about taking over. American leaders saw a once-in-a-generation opportunity to dismantle the old colonial system and build a new world order, one centered not on London, but on Washington. The first major battleground in this covert struggle was economic. In 1944, delegates from 44 allied nations met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. On the surface, the goal was to create a stable, global economy. But beneath the surface, a fierce negotiation was taking place between the British economist John Maynard Keynes and the American diplomat Harry Dexter White. Keynes fought to preserve a role for the British pound, proposing a new international currency that wasn't tied to any single nation. But White, representing American interests, had a different plan. He insisted the new system be built around the US dollar, which would be pegged to gold. Guess who won? The Bretton Woods Agreement made the US dollar the world's reserve currency. Every other country had to peg their currency to the dollar. This was a master. It meant that international trade would now be conducted in dollars, giving the US immense economic power and influence. For Britain, it was a devastating blow. The pound was dethroned, and the economic foundations of its empire began to crumble. It was the first clear sign that the torch of global leadership was being passed. But the competition didn't stop there. The next chapter unfolded far from the negotiating tables, in the oil-rich sands of the Middle East. For decades, Britain had controlled the region's vast oil reserves through companies like the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, later known as BP. This oil fueled the Royal Navy and the British economy. But American oil companies, the so-called Seven Sisters, were hungry for a piece of the pie. They saw the weakening British Empire as an opportunity. A pivotal moment came in 1951 in Iran. The democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, kicking the British out. Initially, Britain planned a military intervention to take back its prize asset, but Washington said no. The US was wary of British colonialism sparking a conflict that could benefit the Soviet Union. Instead, the CIA, in a covert operation codenamed Operation Ajax, worked with British intelligence to overthrow Mossadegh in 1953. But here's the twist. After the coup, the oil wasn't simply handed back to the British. Instead, the US brokered a new deal. The nationalized company was replaced by a consortium. British Petroleum, or BP, was forced to give up its monopoly, and its share was slashed to just 40%. A massive 40% stake went to American oil giants like Gulf Oil and Standard Oil. The message was crystal clear. Britain could no longer act alone. From now on, America would be the senior partner, not just in politics, but in the world's most vital resource. The final, fatal blow to Britain's imperial ego came in 1956, with the Suez Crisis, when Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, a vital artery for global trade controlled by Britain and France. The two old colonial powers decided to take it back by force, coordinating a secret invasion with Israel. They expected the United States to support them, or at least look the other way. They were wrong. President Eisenhower was furious. He saw the invasion as a desperate, last gasp act of colonialism that would drive the Arab world into the arms of the Soviet Union. He didn't send troops. He used a much more powerful weapon. Finance. The U.S. Treasury began selling its reserves of British government bonds. This caused the value of the pound to plummet. The British economy was on the brink of collapse. Facing financial ruin and global condemnation, the British Prime Minister, Anthony Eden, had no choice but to order a humiliating withdrawal. The Suez Crisis was more than just a military failure. It was a moment of profound realization. It proved, once and for all, that Britain could no longer undertake any major foreign policy action without the approval of the United States. The old lion had lost its roar. The master-servant relationship had been reversed. London now took its orders from Washington. From that point on, the decline was rapid. Over the next 2 decades, Britain dismantled its empire, granting independence to colonies across Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. The process was framed as a noble act of decolonization, but the reality was that Britain simply couldn't afford its empire anymore. The economic power that had sustained it was gone, siphoned off by its ambitious American ally. So, what does this secret history tell us? It shows that the transfer of global power was not a gentle, friendly handover. It was a calculated, and at times ruthless, process driven by Americans. The U.S. used its economic might as a weapon to dismantle the British Empire and erect its own informal empire, one based not on territorial control, but on financial and military dominance. The special relationship continued, but it was now a fundamentally unequal partnership. This story isn't about blaming America or pitying Britain. It's about understanding the complex and often hidden forces that shape our world. The world order we live in today, dominated by the US dollar, American corporations, and American military power, wasn't an accident. It was the result of a deliberate, long-term strategy to supplant one global power with another. The rivalry may be over, with the US as the undisputed winner, but its legacy is all around us. It's a reminder that in the great game of geopolitics, even the closest of allies can be the fiercest of competitors when global control is at stake. The sun finally set on the British Empire, not just because of independence movements, but because a new sun was rising in the west, and it wanted the whole sky to itself. Thanks for watching. If you found this hidden history as fascinating as I do, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that secretly shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what you think about this epic rivalry. See you next time.